Hello, welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Munib Ahmed with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. The U.S. Electoral College has elected former Vice President Joe Biden to be the next president. In a speech from his hometown of Wilmington, Biden said the will of the people prevailed. Biden secured all 306 of the votes he was expected to receive, with no electors voting against their state winner. However, President Donald Trump and his most loyal allies in Congress have refused to acknowledge Biden's win. The Deputy Governor of Afghanistan's capital, Kabul, Mahbubullah Muhibbi, has been killed in a bomb attack. Security officials say the governor was traveling with his security guard when a bomb attached to his car went off. No group has claimed responsibility for the blast yet. Turkey and Russia have condemned U.S. sanctions on Ankara over its purchase of S-400 defense system from Moscow. Turkish Foreign Ministry says Ankara will take necessary steps to respond to Washington's move. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said the sanctions are illegitimate and show arrogance towards international law. The COVID-19 death toll in the United States has topped 300,000 with over 16.5 million infections. India's death count has exceeded 143,000, while its infection tally has surged to over 9.9 million. Pakistan has registered over 2,400 new cases and 73 fatalities overnight, pushing the death toll to over 8,900. While globally, the new coronavirus has claimed 1.6 million lives and infected over 72.8 million people. And in golf, South Korean A. Lim Kim has won the U.S. Women's Open Golf Championship in Houston. In a stunning finish, Kim rallied from 5 down and notched birdies on the final 3 holes to surge to take an unassailable lead. These were the headlines. News in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. We'll start from the United States, where the Electoral College has elected former Vice President Joe Biden to be the next president. The vote, which took place in all 50 states and the District of Columbia, formalized Biden's victory over Donald Trump. More details in this report.
After over a month of brazen accusations of mass electoral fraud, litigations, recounts and re-evaluations of votes, the U.S. Electoral College finally settled the tug-of-war for the Oval Office between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Biden secured all 306 of the votes he was expected to receive, with no electors voting against their state winner. The state of California delivered its 55 electoral votes to Biden, officially putting him over the 270 votes needed to secure the White House.
I will now announce the tally of the vote for the office of President of the United States. For Joseph R. Biden of Delaware, a Democrat, ayes 55, noes 0.
Supporters of the new president-elect came out to the streets in various states to celebrate the Democrats' victory. In a speech from his hometown of Wilmington, Biden said the will of people have prevailed. Biden reiterated that he will be president for all Americans and will work to end polarization and divisions fueled by Trump.
You know, in this battle for the soul of America, democracy prevailed. We, the people, voted. Faith in our institutions held. The integrity of our elections remains intact. And now it's time to turn the page, as we've done throughout our history, to unite, to heal. As I said in this campaign, I will be president for all Americans. I'll work just as hard for those of you who didn't vote for me as I will for those who did.
Even after the Electoral College vote, Trump and his most loyal allies in Congress have refused to acknowledge Biden's win. But U.S. Attorney General William Barr has decided to step down after the Electoral College confirmed Trump's defeat. In a letter to Trump, Barr said he will be leaving the post on December 23rd, pledging the allegations will continue to be persuaded.
Now, the Deputy Governor of Afghanistan's capital, Kabul, Mehbubullah Muhibi, has been killed in a bomb attack. Security officials say the governor was traveling with his security guards when a bomb attached to his car went off. They said 2 of his guards were also wounded in the blast. No group has claimed responsibility for the blast yet. Now, Turkey and Russia have condemned United States sanctions on Ankara over its purchase of S-400 defense systems from Moscow. The Turkish Foreign Ministry says Ankara will take necessary steps to respond to the U.S. move.
It says United States allegations that S-400 systems will jeopardize NATO systems are devoid of any technical merit. The ministry adds Washington's decision to impose sanctions is a grave mistake and urges the United States to revise its unjust decision. It asserts that U.S. refusal to solve this matter through diplomacy as befitting two allies is completely senseless. Just before the announcement, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said he was upset that U.S. went ahead with the sanctions. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says the sanctions are illegitimate and show arrogance towards international law. The sanctions target Turkey's top defense procurement and development body, its chairman, and 3 other employees. The measures were announced under the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. This is the first time the act has been used against a fellow member of the NATO alliance.
Now, for more on this, we have been joined by Abdenoor Tomi, an Ankara-based analyst. Sir, thank you very much for your time now. Mr. Tomi, Turkey has announced to take necessary steps against Washington's decision of imposing sanctions on Ankara over its purchase of the Russian S-400 air defense system. What retaliatory measures Ankara can take?
Good morning, sir, and thank you for having me. Actually, as you know, Turks are very pragmatic, and they know how to react to these. Actually, still rhetorical sanctions, because we just heard this 2 days or last week in the European Union that have initiated practically the same rhetoric sanctions. But the U.S. is the new administration, the new coming administration of Joe Biden will be a little or slightly different than from the unprecedented foreign policy of Donald Trump, and notably in the region, because the Americans need the role of Turkey in the region, particularly in the Syrian crisis, and so in Libya. So, and even in the latest developments in the Caucasus and following the Azerbaijan situation. So to sum up all this, so the Americans and also are still look at Turkey as a vital ally, bilaterally and also in NATO.
Mr. Abdenoor, this is the first time the United States has imposed sanctions against a fellow member of the NATO alliance, while Russia, Iran and other regional countries have condemned the U.S. move. So can this press Washington to take back its decision?
I believe so, and as I mentioned, so the next administration will review this decision, because it's still rhetorical, because the ongoing, the outgoing administration is doing anything just for kind of the last minute kiss and kind of causing more troubles for the coming administration. So, but as you mentioned also that Iran and Russia have condemned this. So the axis Tehran, Moscow, Ankara will challenge a great deal the U.S. and the Western regional powers, and will actually stop the unilateralism that have been going on since the last two or 3 decades. I mean, after the end of the Cold War. So this is when you see these the new powers, regional powers, are coming. So this is a serious challenge for the U.S., particularly because it's a very important point here to mention. There is no real alliance between Russia and Turkey, but they are acting as a solid alliance in the region. I mean, you see them in Syria, in Libya, and in the East Mediterranean crisis, even though they don't share common interests, but they are together, I mean, in this point, to kind of de-Westernize the Western hegemony in the region. So this is why it's still too early to say the consequences of these sanctions. But again, I mean, the next days will tell us about the efficiency of this rhetorical move from the U.S. decision.
Well, definitely, absolutely right. Time will tell us. Up the note, Omi, sir, thank you very much for talking to Indus News. Now, moving on, the U.S. has announced new sanctions on Iran too, targeting its Ministry of Intelligence and Security. The Treasury Department blacklisted Mohammad Basri and Ahmed Khazai, both linked to the ministry. Washington accused the officials of involvement in the March 2007 disappearance of Robert Levinson, a former FBI agent. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said Levinson's abduction was an example of Iran's willingness to commit unjust acts. The curbs mark the latest step in U.S. President Donald Trump's maximum pressure campaign against Iran. Now, the UN Human Rights Chief has voiced outrage at Iran's execution of a prominent journalist based in France. In a statement, Michelle Bachelet urged Iran to halt its alarming and increasing use of the death penalty. She said Ruhollah Zam's execution by hanging was emblematic of a pattern of forced confessions. The journalist was hanged on Saturday over his role in protests in Iran during the winter of 2017. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani defended his execution, saying the death sentence passed was carried out lawfully. Earlier, Iran summoned the German and French envoys over the European Union's condemnation of the execution. Now moving to India, where the farmer unions have intensified their agitation in several parts of Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, UP and Madhya Pradesh states. Demonstrators are blocking the Rajasthan-Haryana border, the Singhu and Tikri border, among others, to press for their demands. The farmers insist they will continue their sit-ins until the government repeals the controversial farm laws. Meanwhile, New Delhi has once again refused to accept the reversing of its new laws as a precondition for negotiations with the farmers. The government has deployed rapid action force at Singhu border as farmers' protest enters its 20th day. Now, tens of thousands of farmers protesting against the government's farm laws observed a day-long hunger strike yesterday. Now, Pakistan has condemned terrorist attacks on oil transport vessels and related infrastructure in Saudi Arabia. In a statement, the Foreign Office said these attacks not only threaten Riyadh's security, but of the region as well. It said Pakistan called for an immediate cessation of all attacks against Saudi infrastructure. The Foreign Office reiterated Pakistan's support and solidarity with Riyadh against all threats. Earlier, an oil tanker off the port city of Jeddah suffered an explosion after being hit by an external source. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack. Moving on, Israel's defense forces have shelled the Gaza Strip during their ongoing military exercises. In a tweet, IDF said a tank unintentionally shelled the territory of the Gaza Strip. It said the shelling happened during a mission to increase operational employment of Israeli forces near the Palestinian enclave. The shelling comes less than a month after Israel said an IDF tank opened fire near the Gaza border mistakenly on November 21st. Moving on, a technical meeting on critical reforms of the Libyan economy is being convened in Geneva. In a statement, United Nations support mission in Libya says Acting Chief UN Envoy Stephanie Williams is chairing the meeting. The meeting is being co-presided by Egypt, the United States and the European Union. The United Nations says they are discussing currency reform, the banking crisis and unification of the national budget. They are also mulling a timetable to implement these reforms. It says the meeting is taking place against the backdrop of several promising developments, including the resumption of Libyan oil production. Williams says she hopes an agreement can be reached on concrete objectives over the 2 days of talks. Now in Egypt, the nation's future party, which backs President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, has secured nearly 55% seats in the parliamentary elections. The Election Commission says the party won nearly 75% of contested seats for the newly recreated Senate. The nation's future sharply increased its shares of seats to 315 from 57 in the 596-seat parliament. The list headed by the party won all 284 seats allocated for pre-selected lists under a winner-takes-all system. The party also won 170 of the 284 seats contested by individual candidates. Another pro-Sisi party, the Republican People's Party, won 50 seats and non-affiliated candidates won 93 seats. Meanwhile, rival parties have filed complaints to the Election Commission alleging electoral fraud. Now, Nigeria says it's stepping up efforts to rescue the 300 students abducted by the armed militants in a school attack in northwestern Katsina state. In a statement, President's office said the government is in contact with the kidnappers and is negotiating students' release. It said the security agencies have traced the location of the militants. Meanwhile, the parents of the abducted students are desperately waiting for their children's safe return. Since the attack, all secondary schools in the region have been shut down. South Korea's parliament has passed a bill to ban the launching of propaganda leaflets into North Korea. The move has been condemned by rights activists as a violation of freedom of speech. The law bars any scattering of printed material and goods across the heavily fortified frontier. It also restricts loudspeakers broadcast, which the South's military once hailed as psychological warfare against the North. Any violation of the law is punishable by up to 3 years in prison or nearly $27,500 in fine. The change was approved despite efforts from the opposition to block it. Now, the United Kingdom and the European Union have restarted post-Brexit trade talks in hope of securing an agreement. Both parties have confirmed that there has been enough progress for negotiations to continue. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the negotiators from both sides have not exhausted all options. Earlier, Prime Minister Boris Johnson discussed the deal's main sticking points with von der Leyen. EU's chief negotiator Michel Barnier and his British counterpart Lord Frost met in Brussels. Barnier said a wider deal can fall into place if a route towards an agreement on fishing rights can be identified. The teams have not set a new deadline, but the ultimate deadline will expire on December 31st. Now, Romania's President Klaus Iohannis says he will call on political parties for fresh talks to form a centre-right government. Speaking to reports, he said the first round of talks was over and they had a good exchange of views. But Iohannis said not all terms for designating a new prime minister have been met. The ruling National Liberal Party has proposed incumbent Finance Minister Florin Citu as the next Prime Minister. This follows an inconclusive parliamentary election on December 6, where the opposition took a narrow lead. Now, the COVID-19 death toll in the US has topped 300,000 with over 16.5 million infections. In India, the number of deaths has surpassed 143,000, while the tally of infections has surged to over 9.9 million. Globally, there are more than 1.6 million deaths and nearly 73 million infections. More on coronavirus in this report.
Across the world, increasing COVID-19 deaths and lockdowns overshadow optimism about the rollout of vaccinations. A fresh wave of infections is devastating Brazil, where the government says mass inoculation won't be possible before March. Elsewhere in Latin America, Argentina has become the 9th country in the world to surpass 1.5 million infections. Canada has begun its inoculation drive to become the 3rd nation to administer the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. Meanwhile, the U.S. reported the highest number of deaths in a week since the pandemic began, with the virus claiming more than 17,000 lives. And Operation Warp Speed is busy trying to meet its ambition goal to produce and deliver 300 million doses of vaccine in the U.S. by January 2021.
We might be on some type of similar timeline. Our goal would be for the Moderna product to be available this time next week across the United States. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, a drumbeat vaccine of the initial push being sent to all states across the country.
In Europe, in a bid to test and isolate the positive cases, French authorities have launched a mass testing campaign in Le Havre city. Italy is mulling stricter measures during the Christmas holidays after big gatherings over the weekend sparked worries of a surge. Czech restaurants, hotels and indoor sports venues, which reopened from a lockdown only 2 weeks ago, must shut again from Friday in response to a new rise in infections. Turkey has announced a 5-day full lockdown after reporting a record 229 deaths in a single day. Meanwhile, a new variant of coronavirus has been found in the UK, which is growing faster in some parts of England.
There are many variants. It just happens that this one has quite a few more mutations than some of the other variants. So that's the reason why we've taken it more, particularly seriously. But there's nothing to suggest that the symptoms are different, that the testing is different, or that the clinical outcome is different for this variant.
Singapore is the first Asian country to approve the Pfizer vaccine and says it expects to start receiving shots by the end of the year. South Korean authorities have warned of tougher restrictions if social distancing rules are ignored.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 73 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. This takes the country's death toll to over 8,905. The Health Ministry reported 2,459 new infections overnight. It said there are more than 48,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. The ministry said out of over 443,000 countrywide cases, more than 386,000 people have recovered. The ministry added over 196,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province. Punjab has reported nearly 128,000 cases. Now in Pakistan, the National Accountability Bureau has started to tighten the noose around Jamiyat-e-Ulama-e-Islam Chief Maulana Fazlur Rahman. NAB has also issued call-up notices to people who have business ties with the opposition leader. In a notice, NAB alleged Fazlur Rahman has been involved in corruption and accumulation of assets beyond means. The Bureau sent notices to 5 other people asking them to appear before the accountability watchdog on December 16th for the inquiry. Earlier on December 9th, NAB also sought details of foreign trips of Ziaur Rahman, younger brother of Fazlur Rahman. In a letter to the Establishment Department Secretary, the watchdog said Ziaur Rahman toured more than 20 countries. It said a government employee is obliged by law to seek prior permission for travelling abroad. A batch of Chinese Air Force troops is in Pakistan to participate in a joint Air Force exercise, Shaheen 11. The exercise aims at strengthening bilateral defence ties between the two countries. Details in this report by our correspondent, Sumaira Khan.
Shaheen is the 9th in the series of joint air exercises which is conducted each year in both countries on alternate basis. Director, Center for Aerospace and Security Studies Air Marshal Wasimuddin said the training will improve the comprehensive air combat capability of both forces.
This exercise basically is aimed to increase the interoperability between the two air forces, learn from each other's experiences, polish our aerial tactics, and also improve the bilateral relations between the two countries.
He also warned that India may launch propaganda against the joint exercise.
These exercises are not aimed against any other country. As far as the Indian Air Force is concerned, they are actually transforming their Air Force to fight on two fronts.
Air Vice Marshal Fahimullah Malik says the exercise is being conducted to strengthen the Pakistan Air Force's interoperability.
We would like to find out that what are the impediments in the interoperability. That is, in case of two allied forces have to work together in adverse environments. Number one, it is a good opportunity for us to learn that how do we carry out the interoperability.
The drills would last until the end of December. More than 50 aircrafts and 170 personnel from both sides will participate with real-time air and ground hardware to prepare for contingency scenarios. Sumaira Khan, Indus News, Islamabad.
Now, Japan and China have agreed to soon establish a hotline amid tensions over the sovereignty of islands in the East China Sea. Japanese Defense Minister Nobuo Kishi and his Chinese counterpart Wei Fenghe discussed this during a video conference. Kishi said they had agreed that stable bilateral relations were essential for regional stability, but he said the two ministers did not discuss a time frame for the hotline. The two sides launched a communication mechanism in 2018 to avoid any accidental clashes. Opening a hotline was a pillar of the maritime and aerial communication mechanism, but they have made little progress. 11 elderly people have died in a fire at a retirement home in the Russian region of Bashkortostan. The Emergencies Ministry said 4 people evacuated on their own before the arrival of the firefighters. It said one of the survivors was a staff member who managed to lead others residents out of the wooden building. The ministry said the blaze was put out 3 hours later. The 11 victims were also elderly residents who had mobility issues and could not be quickly evacuated. Russia's investigative committee said it has launched a probe into the incident. Now, President Emmanuel Macron has vowed to hold a referendum to add French commitment to fighting climate change to the country's constitution. Speaking to the Citizens Climate Council, he acknowledged that Paris has not done enough to fulfill its commitments to fight global warming. Macron said he has been in favour of adding biodiversity, the environment and addressing climate change to the constitution. He said the amendments will require a parliamentary vote as well as a referendum. Macron added France needs to keep moving forward and that work is even more urgent. Earlier, the European Union also agreed to achieve the bloc's 2030 targets to reduce greenhouse gases to 55%. Now, the only total solar eclipse of 2020 wowed skywatchers in South America despite overcast skies. The last eclipse of 2020 was visible to observers across a narrow swathe of the South Pacific, Chile, Argentina and the southern Atlantic Ocean. Details in this report.
A solar eclipse occurs when the moon passes between the Earth and the Sun, plunging the planet into darkness. It happens only rarely in any given spot across the globe. This year's last solar eclipse was visible in the South American region. While some in Chile were able to marvel at the total solar eclipse, others were left disappointed as thick fog rolled in along the coastline and rain clouds obscured the sky. More than 100,000 tourists traveled to the lakeside villages of Pucón and Villarrica despite a recent uptick in cases of COVID-19.
It was something very strange because from nothing it started to get dark suddenly. Then from one moment to the next it started to clear up. Only bad thing is that it was cloudy. We couldn't see how the sun hid behind the moon.
Argentina was also able to enjoy a solar eclipse, which could be seen from various parts of the country. Several towns, including Pedra del Aguila in Neuquén province and San Antonio West in Rio Negro province, were plunged into complete darkness. The event lasted about 2 hours in total.
At the exact moment of the eclipse, which was at 1:32 p.m., I think the temperature dropped. We began to experience a little more wind, a little more silence, and well, it is incredible. You cannot explain much in words.
Observers donned sunglasses with special filters, heeding experts' warnings that viewers should not look directly at the eclipse without eye protection. Chile saw another full solar eclipse in its northern desert in July of 2019, the first in that region since 1592.
Now, stocks in the Asia-Pacific have declined after concerns over a coronavirus surge in multiple countries dulled optimism over the vaccine rollout in the United States. The Kospi in South Korea slipped marginally, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index has dropped over 0.5%. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 and the Topix Index also dipped under the flat line. Over in Australia, the ASX 200 has shed nearly 0.5%. Mainland Chinese stocks are also followed the trend, with both Shanghai Composite and the Shenzhen Component shedding below the flat line fractionally. Now in golf, South Korean A. Lim Kim has won the U.S. Women's Open Golf Championship in Houston. In a stunning finish, Kim rallied from 5 down and notched birdies on the final 3 holes to surge to take an unassailable lead. Kim birdied the 70th, 71st and 72nd holes to take a one-shot lead. American player Amy Olsen tied for 2nd position, while Ko Jin Young from South Korea stayed on 3rd position with total 2 points. It was Kim's first ever appearance in the Women's Open and made first victory on the LPGA Tour for the 94th ranked player in the world. Kim is now the 9th Korean winner of the US Women's Open in the last 13 years. And now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. And that is all for now. For the latest update, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.